Two of my sisters died relatively young from aggressive cancers. Both of them received world-class palliative care, and they died well, loved and cared for until their last breath. I and my entire family are so grateful for this, and I would want the same for every Australian. But it's a national shame and tragedy that state governments are scrimping on funding for palliative care and instead pumping money into a system that encourages premature death at the hand of those who have promised to provide care, not killing. State MPs around the country speak confidently of a high degree of support for euthanasia, but when the only options are either poorly funded, inadequate care or a well-funded government offer of assisted suicide, the choice is hollow and can appear callous. An example of this is the New South Wales government announcing that they will slash $150 million of palliative care funds and reallocate the majority of it to implement euthanasia, which becomes legal in New South Wales in November. The cut in palliative care funding ignores recent Compass polling in which 96% of New South Wales citizens said that they believe every Australian should have access to palliative care services. Over 70% indicated they are concerned that the decreasing focus on palliative care and the increase in funding for euthanasia and assisted suicide could cause vulnerable, terminally ill patients to feel pressure and request early death so that they are not a burden on society or their family. No one denies this happens. With euthanasia now legal in every state of Australia, more and more heartbreaking stories are emerging. South Australian man Jim Mills opted for assisted suicide after his NDIS funding was abruptly cut, forcing him to leave his assisted living facility. Devastated, his family and friends are calling on the government to offer better palliative care to support so that no one else is forced to make this diabolical choice. In another recent case, this time in Queensland, a bereaved widower committed suicide by taking euthanasia drugs meant for his wife, reinforcing the truth that euthanasia is suicide by another name and it can never be made safe. Australia's peak body for voluntary assisted dying said that this case was terrible, but they rejected the need for tighter controls. In August this year, a Victorian doctor was fined a paltry $12,000 for failing to follow procedures to have two witnesses present when the patient signed the form agreeing to take the poison which would end their life. Any pretense that euthanasia is anything other than government-approved suicide is being abandoned in the ACT as they discuss whether or not to allow children and people with non-terminal illness to be helped to die in what would be the most horrendous euthanasia laws in our country. In a recent ABC story, one ACT patient, Kath Dyson, articulated the truth about euthanasia well. She was interviewed about the impending introduction of euthanasia legislation in the Territory and discussed whether she was prepared to take matters into her own hands if the laws weren't in place. And she said this, she said, "Well, I guess what it comes down to is suicide one way or another." It's ironic, isn't it? It's not a criminal offence to talk someone out of suicide. In fact, we are encouraged to do so, to talk someone out of suicide, to ask our friends and family, "Are you okay?" But it is a criminal offence to talk someone out of assisted suicide, euthanasia. In fact, in Queensland, you can talk someone into it. Despite the fact that we know people who are ill often feel that they are a burden on others, making them vulnerable to manipulation from exhausted family members or friends or from heirs impatient for an inheritance. Not all relationships are benign or caring. Pressure can also come from medical professionals lacking clinical skills or with an ideological commitment to assisted suicide and euthanasia. Since Queensland's euthanasia legislation came into force, more than one Queenslander a day has chosen to end their lives in this manner. And euthanasia advocates are not ashamed to say that one of the reasons for the high take-up is the fact that Queensland doctors can initiate the discussion of assisted suicide to their patients. This is at a time when many Queensland towns have no dedicated doctor in their local hospital, and the majority of bush facilities are operating with fewer doctors or nurses than they did 18 years ago. For those Queenslanders who live rurally, where palliative care is often out of the question, your first and second assessments for assisted suicide can be via telehealth, with all of its associated vulnerabilities, including the inability to screen for elder abuse, coercion, or mental health concerns. In the ACT, pro-euthanasia advocates are pushing for assisted suicide to be available to children and even for reasons other than terminal illness. In the Northern Territory, A voluntary assisted dying advisory panel has now been established, and this is incredibly concerning for the Territory's young people, particularly Indigenous Australians, for whom suicide is the leading cause of death for 5 to 17-year-olds. What message does the legalisation of state-sanctioned suicide send to young Australians? As I travel around Australia, I find that there is a lot of confusion as to what euthanasia is and what it isn't. Allowing someone to die rather than receive life-sustaining treatment is not euthanasia. Removing life support from a patient is not euthanasia. Treating a patient with pain medication to ease suffering is not euthanasia. Euthanasia is the purposeful administration of a drug, a lethal dose of a bitter-tasting barbiturate. The prioritisation around our nation to channel funding towards state-sanctioned suicide as opposed to life-affirming palliative care is appalling. We are creating a death culture, and it's time our state and federal governments started listening to their people. You know, the Bible tells us to choose life so that you and your children may live. Join us as we do just that. God bless you.